All right, cloud enthusiasts, buckle up because we are diving into something big today, something really exciting. We're talking about Microsoft's announcement, the one about the hybrid deployment model for logic apps. It's a mouthful, I know, but trust me, this is a game changer, especially if you, like me, are all about flexibility and control when it comes to your cloud setup. And the best part, the public preview is out, which means we can actually start digging into some seriously compelling use cases. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's make sure we're all on the same page. What exactly are logic apps, and why should we even care about this whole hybrid thing?
You got it. So think of logic apps like, well, imagine those super complex domino setups where one thing triggers another, and boom, you've got this intricate chain reaction. Logic apps are kind of like that, but for the cloud, for your apps, your data, all those digital tasks. They're basically a way to build these automated workflows connecting all sorts of different services without needing to be a coding whiz.
Okay, so they're the connectors that let all your different cloud tools actually talk to each other. Am I getting that right?
Exactly. You got it in one. And what's got everyone buzzing and why we're talking about it today is this new hybrid deployment model, total game changer. See, before this, logic apps, they were kind of stuck in their lane, living entirely within Azure, Microsoft's cloud environment. But now things are getting really interesting.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this interesting development.
Now you can take those logic apps and you can run them wherever you want. Your own servers, a private cloud, even a third-party public cloud if that's your jam. We're talking ultimate flexibility here.
Whoa, that's a huge shift. I mean, I'm already picturing companies, especially those dealing with super sensitive data, think healthcare, finance, you name it. They got to be jumping for joy at this, right?
Yeah. You're absolutely spot on. This is massive for any organization that even thinks about data privacy, regulations, the whole 9 yards. Think about it. All those headlines about data breaches, sending chills down everyone's spines while keeping your sensitive stuff on your own servers. That's like adding an extra layer of armor, extra peace of mind.
Right. So we're not just talking about convenience here. We're talking about meeting those strict compliance needs, those Hyper-A regulations and all that jazz.
Exactly. You got it. It's a big, big deal.
It's not just about security, though, right? I feel like this hybrid approach could be a lifesaver for companies with, well, let's just say, unique logistical challenges.
100%. I'm talking companies operating in areas where internet access is like a rare commodity, or maybe they're stuck with these legacy systems that are, shall we say, a tad resistant to this whole cloud migration thing, this model. It's a game changer for them, letting them tap into the power of logic apps, all that automation goodness, without needing to go full on cloud.
So we're talking about bridging the gap between the cloud and those on-premises systems, getting the best of both worlds without having to compromise, right?
Bingo! You hit the nail on the head. And the best part is, this opens up so many possibilities, so many ways to tailor your setup to your specific needs. I mean, the sheer variety of setups companies have these days, it's mind-boggling. And this model embraces that. It adapts to that.
Okay, now this is where it gets really exciting for me. So, the inside scoop, the source material we have for this deep dive, it mentions this early access phase they had and how Microsoft saw some seriously creative uses of this hybrid approach. And while they don't get into the specifics, bummer, I know. It makes me super curious to explore those potential use cases, to see how people are actually putting this flexibility to work.
Let's do it. Even without specific examples from those early adopters, we can still look at the bigger picture and, really pinpoint where this kind of flexibility would be most valuable.
Let's dive in and give me the rundown. Who benefits most from this hybrid model? Paint me a picture.
All right, picture this. Imagine a global manufacturing giant, factories humming with activity all over the world, right? Now, some of these factories, they're cutting edge, fully connected to the cloud, the whole shebang. But then you've got others still chugging along with those trusty older systems, maybe even offline every now and then. And here's the kicker. This hybrid model. It's like the magic bridge that connects them all, letting them automate processes across the entire company, from those shiny cloud-connected hubs to those, let's call them character-building legacy setups.
Oh, I totally see it. The beauty of this is that it doesn't discriminate. It brings everyone to the party. You've got these massive operations streamlining everything no matter where things are physically located. That's huge for efficiency. Okay. But let's shift gears for a sec. Let's zoom in a bit, bring it down to earth. What about our smaller players, those local businesses, the heart and soul of our communities? Does this hybrid model have anything to offer them? Or is it just for the big leagues?
Absolutely. This is for everyone, and I'll tell you why. Think about, say, a local clinic right in your neighborhood. They're dealing with incredibly sensitive data,
Yeah.
patient records, all that security is their top priority, no question about it.
And they're probably obligated to keep that data on site, right?
Yeah.
Regulations and all that.
Exactly. So they're thinking on-site is the safest bet. But hold on, they also want to join the modern world, right? They want to use those slick cloud-based systems for appointments, for billing, for all those things that make life easier. And this is where our hybrid hero swoops in, this model. It lets them do both, have their cake and eat it too. Top-notch security for that sensitive data, and the efficiency, the convenience of those cloud-based tools.
So it's all about finding that sweet spot, that perfect balance, meeting those non-negotiable security needs without sacrificing the ability to innovate, to use the best tools for the job.
You nailed it. It's about having options, having choices, and not being forced into a corner. And here's the really exciting part, this flexibility. It goes beyond just where you run your logic apps. It actually spills over into how you pay for them, the financial side of things.
Now you're speaking my language. Tell me everything about this new pricing model. Break it down for me.
All right, so with this hybrid approach, Microsoft is switching things up, going for a more, let's say, pay-as-you-go vibe. They're billing you per vCPU, per hour of usage, which might sound a little techie, but it's actually pretty cool.
Okay, confession time. I mean, a quick translation on that one. Per vCPU, what does that even mean in plain English?
Sure. Think of a vCPU, a virtual CPU, as the engine of your logic app, the muscle it uses to flex and do its thing to process all those tasks. And traditionally, cloud providers, they were all about those fixed plans, those buy-in-bulk deals. But this per vCPU model, it's like switching from a flat rate energy bill to one where you only pay for the kilowatt hours you actually use.
Okay, now I'm with you. So instead of committing to a big chunk of resources up front, you're only paying for the computing power your logic app actually uses, like in real time.
Exactly. It's like having a super detailed energy bill for your logic apps. And why does this matter? Well, let's say your workflows are super demanding at certain times, maybe when you're processing a surge in orders or something, but then things quiet down, you don't need all that horsepower anymore. With this model, you're not stuck paying for resources you're not even using.
Okay, yeah, I'm starting to see the appeal here, especially for businesses that see a lot of ebb and flow in their operations. No more overpaying for those idle moments. You're only billed for what you actually use.
That's the beauty of it. More control, more transparency, and potentially some sweet, sweet cost savings. But, and there's always a but, right?
Hit me with it. What's the catch?
Well, there's one little detail, one important caveat to keep in mind. This per vCPU pricing, it's specifically for the logic apps themselves.
Okay, so what you're saying is there's more to it, other factors at play.
Exactly. If you're using other Azure services, think databases, storage, or if you're tapping into those managed connectors, like integrating with Office 365 or Dynamics 365, those, they still play by their own rules. They're billed separately based on their usual pricing models. Just wanted to keep it real, no surprises.
Good to know. Transparency is key. Always
Yep.
appreciated. So we've got all this flexibility, this potential for cost savings. It all sounds incredibly promising, game-changing even. But I got to ask, even with cutting-edge tech like this, there's got to be some limitations, some growing pains, especially in these early stages, right? What are we looking at there?
You're right. No system is perfect, especially fresh out of the oven, still in its public preview phase. And being the transparency champions that we are, we got to talk about it. The blog post we've been digging into, it does point out a few known limitations. Think of them as, those little under construction signs you see, areas where they're still working their magic.
Okay, so what kind of construction zones are we talking about here?
One of the big ones, the one that really jumped out at me, is all about SAP Access. Now, for those who might not be familiar, SAP, that's like the heavyweight champion of business software, especially for those big enterprise-level players. And if their whole world revolves around SAP systems and they need those tightly integrated with their logic apps, well, here's the thing.
Don't keep me in suspense. Spill the beans.
That direct connection, that seamless integration, it's not quite there yet in the hybrid deployment model.
Okay, so a potential roadblock, a temporary detour for our SAP-reliant friends.
Exactly. But hey, the good news is it's a known limitation, which means Microsoft is aware of it. They're on the case.
So SAP enthusiasts, maybe hold off on building those mission-critical integrations just yet, at least until this gets ironed out.
Precisely. Now, another limitation that caught my eye, especially being a bit of a code geek myself, is the whole custom code situation. You see, developers, we love to tinker, to customize, to build those truly unique solutions. And while you can still use some custom code in this hybrid model, it's not completely unleashed just yet.
Okay, so for our code-loving listeners, what kind of limitations are we talking about here? Give us the technical details.
Sure. So things like XSLT 1.0, that's a bit of a coding language, and the full .NET framework, that's like a developer's toolbox, they're not fully supported yet in this hybrid world. It's not that you can't use custom code at all. It's more like you might encounter a few speed bumps, need a workaround or two, especially for those really complex setups.
Got it. So a bit of a heads up for the coding wizards out there. You might need to get a little creative with your workarounds for now.
Exactly. It's functional, it's doable, but maybe not quite as seamless as they're used to. But hey, that's what public previews are for, right? Ironing out those wrinkles.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned other limitations, more on the technical side. What else should we be aware of?
Right. So one that might sound a bit intimidating, but bear with me, is the lack of support for managed identity authentication.
Okay, time out. Before we go any further, can we get a quick explanation on that one? Managed identity authentication. It sounds important, but I'll be honest, I'm drawing a blank here.
Of course, no problem. It's one of those things that sounds way more complicated than it actually is. Imagine it like this. Managed identity authentication. It's like giving your Logic app a super secure ID card within your cloud environment. So instead of fumbling around with passwords, which, let's be honest, can be a security nightmare, it can just flash its ID and access all those different services and resources securely.
Okay, I'm with you. So without this managed identity thing fully up and running in the preview, it could create some roadblocks, some security concerns.
Exactly. It's not a deal breaker for everyone, but for those who are really, really serious about security, those who prioritize it above all else, it's something to keep in mind.
Got it. A temporary speed bump on the road to super secure automation. Makes sense. Now, what about those other technical limitations you mentioned?
Right. So on top of that, we've got the whole Visual Studio Code situation. Now, for the non-developers listening, Visual Studio Code, it's like the holy grail of code editors, the tool that many developers live and breathe in.
It's where the magic happens.
Exactly. And usually, Microsoft provides these handy extensions, these add-ons that make it super easy to work with different Azure services. But with this hybrid model, that dedicated VS Code extension, it's still in the works.
So while it's not a complete showstopper, it does mean developers might need to adapt their workflow a bit, maybe rely on some workarounds until that dedicated support rolls in.
Exactly. It's all about these little quality of life improvements that make a big difference for those who live and breathe code.
I hear you. So looking at these limitations as a whole, it seems like they're more about specific features, specific integrations that aren't quite ready for prime time yet. It doesn't sound like we're talking about fundamental flaws with the hybrid deployment model itself, am I right?
You're spot on, and that's the key takeaway here. Microsoft is being very transparent, very upfront about these being known limitations. They're acknowledging them, and more importantly, they're actively working on addressing them, which is always a good sign.
It's refreshing to see that kind of transparency, that commitment to continuous improvement.
Absolutely, it builds trust, and it shows they're really listening to those early adopters, those who are putting this tech through its paces.
Speaking of which, this whole conversation, this shift towards hybrid setups, it really highlights a bigger trend we're seeing in tech, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. It's like the walls are coming down, those rigid lines between it's my way or the highway, cloud or our on-premises, they're blurring.
Yeah, it's not about picking sides anymore. Not about pledging allegiance to one camp or the other.
Exactly. It's about what problem am I trying to solve? What works best for my situation? And sometimes the answer is, well, a little bit of both.
It's that flexibility that's so powerful, so liberating. It's about technology adapting to the way businesses actually operate, not the other way around.
100%. And for anyone listening, anyone who deals with data, builds workflows, or just, wants to stay ahead of the curve, understanding these hybrid models, that's crucial. That's the future unfolding.
It's like adding another tool to your toolbox, expanding your options.
Right. Exactly. The more you know, the more you can do.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into this brave new world of the hybrid deployment model for Logic apps, what's the one big takeaway you want to leave our listeners with today?
For me, it boils down to this choice. The cloud, it's amazing, it's transformative, but it's not one size fits all, and that's okay. This new model from Microsoft, it's a perfect example of how things are evolving, how tech is becoming more flexible, more adaptable, more aligned with what businesses actually need.
It's about empowering businesses to build the solutions that work for them, on their terms.
Exactly.
I love that. It's not about following the hype. It's about finding the best tool for the job. And sometimes that means getting a little creative, a little hybrid. A huge thank you to you, our expert, for walking us through all of this, for breaking it down and making it, dare I say, fun.
My pleasure. Always a blast to dive into these topics with you.
And to all of you tuning in, keep those questions and comments coming. We love hearing from you, so hit us up on our website or social media. Let's keep this conversation going. Until next time, stay curious, Cloud Explorers.